And do you want to see how big of a fraud Chris Hayes is? This is sweet. Aaron, you found this. You sent this to me. Now, this is an interview he did in the New Yorker. And this is one of the most stunning paragraphs you're ever going to read. And I'll read it to you. And then I'm going to throw it to Aaron and he can. So Chris Hayes was being interviewed about Russiagate. He was asked about Russiagate in the New Yorker. And the interviewer says this: I don't want to put MSNBC in the same category as certain other cable news networks at all. Well, you should. You should. They're no better. But do you think that cable news generally, and MSNBC included, have played some role in fostering a climate where paranoia about the other side or hyper-partisanship or conspiracy theorizing can find a common ground? So that's the question. Do you think cable news generally, and MSNBC included, played some role in fostering this environment where people can do Russiagate, this evidence-free conspiracy theory, for 3 years at the top of their lungs, red-baiting anybody who disagrees with them politically? Does MSNBC play any role in fostering that culture? And this is his answer. I think it's actually fairly endemic and part of human information processing at all times. I don't know. I think that's often the way that we make sense of the world. If you go back and you look at COINTELPRO stuff and essentially the kind of combination of dirty tricks and surveillance that the FBI was using on Black Panthers and others, one of the effects was that it drove them nuts. They all started going a little crazy and getting super paranoid, but that was part of the point of it. So I just want to stop before I even get to the part that's highlighted. The good part's coming. What Chris is doing here is he's making it. This is what happens when you read too many books. So Chris is trying to make an analogy between what the FBI did to the Black Panthers in the 60s and what Russia did through their Facebook memes to MSNBC. So what the Black Panthers were doing, by assassinating Fred Hampton, it's the same thing as Russia putting a Facebook meme up. That had the same psychological effect on Chris Hayes and Rachel Maddow that as the FBI's oppression of the Black Panthers. Just so you know, that's what he's saying. And he's not in a straitjacket when he's saying this. That's a grown-up person with glasses on, who went to college, who said that. Now, here comes the even better part. Do you want to comment on that first before we go any further out, Aaron?
Well, he went to college. He went to Brown so he could learn how to come up with an excuse for being a tool of the elite with language like that. I mean, this like epistemic jargon, I think it's actually fairly endemic and part of human information processing at all times. Is that there's something about the acquisition of knowledge and language that makes you spew a ridiculous conspiracy theory and exclude all skepticism for 3 years, and then you go on and compare yourself to the Black Panthers. So somehow what the FBI did to the Black Panthers is equal to what you did in going on the air and worshiping the FBI and the CIA for 3 years and elevating them as heroes and even putting them as your colleagues. Like literally, former CIA director John Brennan was a colleague of Chris Hayes as like a chief intelligence analyst, and yet they're somehow analogous to the Black Panthers. It's the most pathetic answer I've ever seen, and the best part is that it gets better.
It gets better. There's more to this. So this is part of Chris Hayes' "you made me hit you" justification. You made me. That's what Russia made me do this. I wouldn't have done this if it wasn't for them. Here we go. Ready? So I also don't want to take the agency away from the actual actor here, which is the Russian government doing these things in 2016 that really had very profound, tangible effects and have produced some amount of craziness. So it's Russia. I got to finish it. I don't want to lose sight of their agency in producing that state of affairs. I think that in some ways was the seed that has flowered into whatever we're dealing with now. So he's saying that the reason why everyone was mental and did a 3-year evidence-free conspiracy red baiting theory on the president of the United States and any of their political opponents, the reason they did it is because Russia is so psychologically powerful that they made them nuts. Putin made Chris Hayes nuts in the fucking membrane. And that's why he did it. It's not my fault. They made me fucking crazy. That's what he's saying. That's what he's saying.
Russiagate was all about blaming Russia for America's problems, right? So Russia was responsible for Donald Trump getting elected. It was responsible for racial injustice, because some Russians took out some ads on Facebook that referenced Black Lives Matter. Russia was responsible for everything. Russia could have possibly turned off the heat in the wintertime, according to Rachel Maddow, and killed millions of people by knocking out our power during frigid temperatures. Russia was the fault of everything. Now, according to Chris Hayes, Russia was also responsible for the Russiagate conspiracy theories. So it was Russia that made Chris Hayes refuse to bring on any skeptics for 3 years and push this thing. It was Russia that made Chris Hayes bring on Jonathan Chait to ponder whether Donald Trump has been a Russian asset since 1987. It's like, imagine what's going on in his brain there. I feel for Chris because he's deep down, he's a bright guy with integrity somewhere. Deep down, there is. He's done good stuff before. So imagine what has to go on in his brain for him to have to come up with an answer like this. Because you can no longer get away with ignoring the fact that Russiagate was insane and debunked. So he has to acknowledge that. The only way he'd acknowledge that is to find some other way to explain it, because it certainly can't be because he was just credulous and corrupt in peddling it, and took all the benefits that it offered him in having a cable news show and rising to resistance fame and all that stuff. He can't acknowledge that. So now the logical explanation is that it has to be Russia's fault. The question is, has Russia's grip on Chris Hayes really fully eased? So is it possible that this answer itself, the two, that Putin made Chris speak in this way?
How do we know he's not still insane in the membrane because of Russia right now? That's what you're saying. He could be still under the influence of Russia. And that's probably why he never booked you on his show, or Glenn Greenwald. And it wasn't because it was because his show gets booked by the Red under his bed. That's how Russia controls his show. They're booking the guests. You know that. So wait, is he suggesting Rachel Maddow is a Russian? Is that, I don't.
Well, yeah, and if Rachel Maddow doesn't see, Rachel Maddow still stands by all the Russiagate craziness. She still thinks it's legit. So does that mean, according to Chris Hayes' logic, is Rachel Maddow still under the influence of the seed that has flowered into whatever we're dealing with now, according to Chris Hayes? And because, of course, we don't want to deny Russia its agency in being responsible for all this.
I don't want to deny Russia's its agency. What kind of a fucking social justice douchebag warrior fucking virtue signaling cocksucker comes up with talking about Russia's agency? And what the fuck? Oh my God. Oh my God. You just hear when when I hear him talk like that, I just you know that sound you hear? It's the sound of women's thighs slapping together. That's what that is when you hear a guy talking like that. So the first part of it, that they did an evidence-free, red-baiting, McCarthy smear, conspiracy theory of the president and all their political enemies for 3 years straight, that's very Fox Newsian that they did that, right? Because that's what Fox News did when Obama became president. But then, after it's been revealed it's all bullshit, after it was revealed that Barack Obama actually had a long-form birth certificate, what does Chris Hayes do? He did exactly what Donald Trump did. He doubled down. He blamed someone else. He goes, they hate. So his response to this is Trumpian. So here's the evidence. Here's the facts. He just ignores it and points the finger. It's not my fault. Somebody else's. That's very Trumpian. And what the thing I've been talking about is what Trump has done is not through any genius of his own, but he has unwittingly revealed these people to be very Trump-like. The people who claim to oppose him. Just like the people who claim to oppose him are being revealed by the Tara Reade story to be just like Trump and the Kavanaugh defenders. In fact, exactly like that.
Yeah.
So what Trump is doing is revealing that given the situation and the circumstance, that Rachel Maddow, Chris Hayes, the Democratic Party can be just as horribly corrupt as George Bush, Donald Trump, and Fox News, given the circumstance. Isn't that that's the real lesson from this, right?
It's one of the many lessons, yeah. And, and it's why when, you hear liberal elites, intellectuals mock Fox News viewers, they mock people who embrace conspiracy theories. What they're really doing is projecting, because no conspiracy theory in the last 4 years has been as damaging and as stupid as the conspiracy theory and all of its different variations that coastal elites, people with, a lot of education, high salaries, embraced and centered as their main thing for over 3 years. So it's really it's an act of projecting. And when you're projecting, you're actually attacking on other people something you don't like about yourself. And that's what I think fuels so much of this animus towards average voters, Fox viewers and all that from coastal liberals, because that's who they are. They are the biggest conspiracy theorists of the last 3 years. It's not even close. This idea that Trump is controlled by Putin, that Putin has a P-tape, that Trump and Russia are communicating by secret ping communications through Russia's Alpha Bank, that Michael Cohen went to Prague to pay off mysterious hackers, on and on and on. Carter Page was offered a 18% stake in the Russian oil company. I mean, it's the most insane stuff, but yet this was a staple of quote unquote respectable opinion since 2016. It's humiliating, and what's stopping accountability is that these circles pretty much control, enlightened opinion in media and in academia, and so there's zero room for any self-reflection, and that's why it's those of us who are on the relative margins who have to do it, because everybody else in a position of prominence just drank the Kool-Aid.
So I think I heard Chomsky make this point. Somebody made this point that, so like what we're saying, the establishment, the mainstream, and the culture are saying we're crazy outsider conspiracy theorists because we don't actually buy into their conspiracy theorists, which is Russiagate. What Chomsky said is that real reform never gets implemented until it's accepted by the establishment.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so then it's not really reform anymore. They're the ones doing it, right? So so we're going to be considered still outliers because the establishment is never going to admit that this reform needs to take place inside their thinking. And so it'll never be seen as what it should be, which is honest reporting that should be there to reform the way they do so it'll never, because they'll never accept it, and they're just moving on. And it's just accepted fact that Trump is Russian and that he should have been impeached and he's a criminal and nobody else is, even though they all are, including the people who report on them. They're criminally, I would say if there was a criminal journalism court, they would be found guilty of malfeasance.
Yeah, and look, I mean, that was a lesson of the Iraq War. All the figures who pushed the Iraq WMD scam, all of them have been elevated to high positions of prominence. Jeffrey Goldberg wrote all these crazy stories in the New Yorker about, Saddam's ties to Al-Qaeda and all this stuff. He's now editor-in-chief of The Atlantic.
Yes.
David Frum, prominent resistance pundit. Jonathan Chait, who, his jaw, like literally everything he does, he's wrong. He supports everything that is evil and wrong. But he's still a prominent columnist at New York Magazine. And Chris Hayes, for example, brought him on for when he wrote a cover story about exploring the question of whether or not Trump has been a Russian intelligence asset since 1987. So yeah, the system rewards failure. Sometimes they make an example of one person. So Judith Miller, who was a New York Times reporter, she lost her job. But but they always do that. And same with Abu Ghraib. People at the bottom, a few bad apples. But it's never. But the reform and the critique is never systemic, and that's how it continues.
So let me just say that, just close by saying, what Chris Hayes is doing by blaming Russia for them pushing a conspiracy theory with no evidence for 3 years, never bringing on anyone to debunk them or ever critic of their theory, and wagging their finger at anybody else who didn't agree with them and calling them Russian. His excuse for doing that is that Russia made him so crazy that they had to do that. It's Russia's fault. They have the age. They're the ones. They're the actors. They're the instigators in all this. They're the ones controlling everything. It would be the equivalent of him saying, hey, sure, we got the Iraq war wrong, but it was Saddam Hussein's fault for the way he made us think he had weapons of mass destruction. He's a big jerk. That guy, don't take away Saddam's agency in all this. It was his fault that we invaded him. That's what Chris Hayes is saying, right?
Saddam Hussein gaslighted me into believing and saying on television for forever that he has weapons of mass destruction and ties to Al-Qaeda. Yes, it's the exact same thing. It's so pathetic from Chris. And, you know, one day I hope we'll get him acknowledging that it was all bullshit. But right now, look, he paid a lot of money to lie and to push propaganda. So he won't do that. That's not his job right now. But it's so funny. And for those of us who have suffered through Russiagate, it does bring a certain amount of comedic relief when you get hilarious moments like this, something so pathetic as a leading Russiagate peddler blaming Russia for his Russiagate peddling. It's funny. It's pathetic and it's funny.
You know what I say? Crowd strike, more like crowd strikes out. Am I right? Come on. So Malcolm says the hilarious thing is that MSNBC hosts accuse Aaron and Glenn Greenwald of being controlled by Russia, and yet here is Chris Hayes defending himself by saying that Russia controls him and the other MSNBC hosts. That is what he's saying. He's saying, yeah, we got paranoid and mental. We got crazy. Like the Black Panthers went crazy. We got a little crazy. That was the point of what Russia was doing. They made us crazy, so we did this thing. They controlled you? Yeah. Oh, guess who they did not control? My friend Malcolm reminds us. You, Aaron, and Glenn Greenwald. Hey, this is the part where I tell you where our live shows are, but there aren't any. And then I would tell you to go join our premium, but nobody has a fucking job. So why don't you just enjoy the video?